It is wonderful to be here, sharing a little space and time with you three and thinking about our work, here on this beautiful day on these Coast Salish lands, joining from the Bank Center. And as I think about that, and as I think about this conversation accompanying this article about the Bank Center, I always want to make sure that we shout out and really honor the ongoing work and legacy of James A. Banks, and of course the Center for Multicultural Education, which became in 2018 the Bank Center for Educational Justice, with Jazmen Moore joining as our first research assistant back in 2018, and Doua and Alayna, you two coming on that following year, I believe. So again, really grateful to be in conversation and just thinking about each of you, what you offer, your own work, and also our collective work. And so I want to make sure to let everybody listening know that I am joined today by Jazmen Moore, Alayna Eagleshield, Doua Ka. These three are really important educational and cultural leaders in their communities, have done many things, over their lives, and bring that to their work here in the Bank Center, their work in their doctoral studies. And so again, just really grateful to be in conversation. So I thought that maybe where we could start is just thinking a little bit about, and I'm thinking of this article that this conversation accompanies, and some of the things that are highlighted in the article. And I thought maybe we could start by what brought you here to the University of Washington and to, your work in the center. And so maybe briefly share your journey to doctoral work. And maybe Jazmen, since it has been 10 years since we've known you, and you came to the center that first year that we started, maybe you could start by just sharing a little bit about, we'll all just share briefly like your journey to doctoral work, and whatever comes up with you when you think of that.
Ooh, I'm gonna try to keep it as brief as possible. But just to say that prior to coming to the University of Washington for this doctoral program, I was a high school teacher in the city of Chicago, and in the west suburbs for 5 years. I was teaching at a school in Rogers Park in the north side of Chicago for 4 years, and for 1 year at a school in Oak Park, Illinois. And a lot of what influenced my decision to even go into teaching came from my interest in work and the way I was supported as an undergraduate student at Michigan State.
That's right.
And I was studying English with a concentration in creative writing and women's and gender studies, and spending a lot of time thinking about the relationship between storytelling, poetry, silence, and Black women and Black girls, and how we share stories. And
That's
I know
right.
one of the few spaces where I felt really supported in doing that work was in the class of Professor Ray Paris, who, read my work, and was one of the first times I really felt seen. I felt like people weren't dismissive of the things I was writing about that often had to do with like the identities that stand at the intersection of race, gender, class, and not being dismissed. That's sad, but that felt like a big deal in the context of those spaces.
Right, it is.
And I remember when I decided, ultimately decided to go into teaching, Ray was super supportive, but she was also like, yeah, and I think you're probably gonna go back to school one day and you'll get a PhD. And I was like, oh, that's cute, maybe someday. And I didn't discount it either, but I was like, right now, I'm just focused on entering into my career field as a teacher. And during those early years, I remember Ray connecting me more and more with you, Django,
Right.
putting me on to organizations like the National Council of Teachers of English, supporting me and applying for awards like the Early Career Educator of Color Award, which wasn't just like this title, but it came with mentorship. It came with building community. It's tapped me into people who like I felt really loved and cared for and supported in the work of teaching and learning, like Lorena Herman, like, these educator big siblings.
Right.
But between that support and just the learning I was doing with my students in Chicago, especially in the context of youth poetry spaces that we were like co-creating together with like spoken word clubs, but also building with larger citywide youth poetry spaces, like Louder Than a Bomb Poetry Festival.
That's right.
Young Chicago authors spaces that they host. I was really starting to think more deeply about like what does it mean to create and to sustain learning spaces where Black and Brown students, where queer students, where students coming from all different regions and areas of the city and like the metropolitan Chicago area can come together to share those stories and to also use what they're writing and creating to also speak back to a lot of injustice and to critique systems of oppression. And I was constantly in awe of that and trying to think like, how can I replicate this in my classroom? And our classrooms, the spaces for this to ultimately take place. And so I with that kind of inspiration, I like applied to graduate school, and I was supported by organizations like the Institute for Recruitment of Teachers in navigating that process. And
Right. These are three award-winning folks. These are just dropping things. They awarded NCTE, Institute for Recruitment of Teachers, you know, this and that.
No biggie.
No, I'm trying to give props. IRT
No,
like
that's
I
right.
applied, they accepted me, and then helped me figure out how to, because trying to teach full time or do anything full time, to mother, to work multiple jobs. I know that many of us to be already in a graduate program and try to apply to grad school, especially as someone who's first generation and just doesn't know like how to navigate that process, it's challenging. So I'm just trying to shout them out because they put me. But okay, this is not being brief, but I just want to say like all these pieces lined up, and I just like to I like to shout out the people who've cared for me and supported me along this way. So with the thanks of all these experiences, I was able to, decide on what felt like the best fit in terms of graduate programs. Where did I feel like I was going to be cared for and supported in terms of like mentorship, and also where was I going to have the opportunity to grow in the areas that felt really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So because I was coming in from teaching, and that was just like really, that was my grounding framework. I wanted to have an opportunity to work in teacher education, and I was going to have that opportunity and did at the University of Washington. And I also wanted to gain experience as a research assistant. And that was something I was going to be able to do through my work with the Bank Center, which was also committed to like hosting community-based events, building partnerships with youth on campus at UW, as well as youth in the communities, and just knowing that I was going to have an opportunity to do all these different things while also pursuing my education and being supported by faculty members like you, Django. It felt like a really great fit. It felt like a strong opportunity. And I'm going to also say it like I was going to be financially supported because that's a big factor. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Being transparent, like coming from a working class family, spending 5 years as a teacher, like I was not in tech. I was not going with those lucrative ends. So
and Seattle isn't exactly cheap. So
no, it's not. And that being an important consideration too. So
absolutely.
All these factors kind of came together, and I'm grateful to be here holding it down with the Django and fam.
Well, we are grateful, and I thought maybe Alayna, Ray and I have known you for some years too, in the work and the world, and so maybe you could just share a little bit about your journey to doctoral work.
All right. Yeah, so it was crazy in 2016. Well, I had been in a master program. I've been studying health for my whole life, ever since my dad was a CHR, which is a community health worker, and they were like considered the first responders back in the day. So his little radio would be going and he'd be getting a call, whatever, they'll be giving codes, and he'd whip around, throw his little light on top of the car, and we'd be like the first responders into a lot of, and I don't know if it's legal for me to be in there, but, and so I had this like drive to support my community in preventative work, in health work. And my mom was a nurse for 30 plus years. And so I had gotten to experience the needs of my community in a real intimate way. And so when I was in when I had gotten the opportunity to join a master program, it was in public health. And I did it online. So I was still working within my community. I was the health education director. Oh no, I guess at the time I was the language specialist. And then 2016 happened. The Ocheti Shakoi camp came up as we were opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline that was going to be put in just north of our community. And it's crazy. So many things happened. I feel like for me, that was like a huge influx of folks from all over the world came, and it was like my first experience of what, and I didn't have these words at the time, but like what interculturality could be and was, and I got to learn from other communities, and it was really cool because then I got to, well, so Ray, again, connection there, but Ray Paris had reached out. I had started a school actually at the camp, and Ray Paris had reached out to me and was like, hey, I seen that you started a school. Is there any way I can support you? I'm a professor studying critical, I don't even remember what the words were, because at the time these were all like, you know, Charlie Brown. I had no idea these big words. And so anyway, so she reached out to me and asked if there was a way that she could support the work. And at the time, we had been dealing with the state because they were basically putting out articles saying that we're running a school illegally and all these different things that were happening. And folks were wanting to be in the camp with their kids, but also worried about like, will I get in trouble for truancy, not having my kid in school? Well, this. And there were aunties and grandmas that were saying, like, reminding us that this is a tactic they've used since time immemorial, as they go after our kids. And so when Ray reached out, I was like, please come and help maybe train teachers. I have no idea what that looks like. Can you write a certificate for us? Like, I was just trying to imagine the types of support that we could get from a professor, you know, that was willing to come donate their time. And so I'm so thankful, Ray. And then Django, you had come with Ray and you got to, you know, be in community there, meet my family, meet the folks that were the full-time teachers at the camp, which was, you know, Blaise Starkey, Teresa Zegelwitz, and Jose Zegne. And then there was multiple teachers and folks that were like influxing, coming in and out. And so when camp closed, we were like in this processing period of like, well, now what? You know, how do we continue this type of possible education model, possible health model, possible community model? Because before that, I don't know, you know, obviously I'm not going to get too much into like a reservation context, but there's just, there's a lot of things that folks don't understand about how reservations work or our governments or things like that. And so when the team that was a part of coming with Ray and Django, introducing us to like all these other scholars, which was like Jeremy Garcia, Valerie Shirley, Sweeney Winchief, Tim San Pedro, all of these other amazing.
Sandy Grande, who had maybe come early.
Sandy Grande. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Sandy. Yes. And so Sandy didn't get to come. They were on virtual, but so then there was this amazing group that got to come and witness and be a part of the camp. And so, you know, it was this really beautiful experience of like getting to know these scholars without their titles and having them like immerse themselves in that movement at that time. And they were like, these are things that we read about or write about, but this is like happening now. This is such a monumental moment. And when camp closed, they continued to support the work that was happening. And at the time, I think I was in a processing period and I was like, well, now what? I don't even know what we do moving forward. And then Django and the other defenders of the water school, which is all these scholars that are supporting the school that was started at the camp, were like, well, what about a PhD program? And I had no idea, you know, like for me, I don't know, PhDs are like harmful. And my family definitely let me know, like, don't become one of those. And, you know, and obviously they're proud now, but it was like this thing of of getting a PhD was almost, yeah, it's just
the traditions of extraction and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I, in my ear, there's all these scholars that are doing beautiful work. I like, come get a PhD. This is really beautiful stuff. And then my family is like, harmful, harm, danger. And so I had to like weigh those things. And same, I had been introduced to the Institute of Recruitment of Teachers, I think through Jeremy Garcia, had encouraged me to apply. And honestly, if I didn't do that and get that support, I don't know if I would have been able to like, figure out the resume part of it. I had a dinky resume before that, but like they gave me a template. I got to fill that out. I had all this support to apply for a PhD program, but also I was like struggling with my own, I don't know, different feelings of like, do I need this? Is this the best thing for me and my community? Is this something that ultimately is going to benefit, the greater of myself, my family, my community? And
right.
And so when I was deciding, I had to put in for multiple places. I was accepted to a few of them,
Right.
and because it's who also, right? Like folks will put in words for you, and because we had this group of defenders of the water school who were like rooting for me in these different institutions that I was applying for, I had a little tiny pot to choose from. And ultimately the advice that I had been, and I was looking obviously for mentors. I loved each and every one of them. So I was applying to places where folks were like, yeah, this is a good spot. Probably not there. I don't know anybody there. And so,
Real.
so I was being led and guided by these folks, and it was something that I'm so thankful for. And I want to figure out if folks in my community do go towards a PhD, like how do we connect them with community?
Right.
How do we get them sourced in so that they have somebody to have their back in these places? And so ultimately I was accepted to a few of them, and the people who were there were like, yeah, this is a beautiful program, we want you here, but go where the money is because you should not be in debt for for the rest of your life because of a program. And so and I was so thankful, I had such a tight relationship with Ray and Django. And so I was so excited to be here because I am also a mom. I didn't mention that, but I'm also a mom, and my kids need to have family. And so that was really super important to me as well. So yeah, that's how I ended up here at the University of Washington. And I'm so thankful. I feel like we've been for real protected, and I don't necessarily feel like I've, people talk about the harm of academics, and I'm sure it's there. I'm sure there are people who read my stuff or who hear about me or the way I talk or the way I represent myself, whatever, that look down on it. But I don't ever have to feel those things, because I really feel like having Django as a mentor is like a beautiful buffer for me, who, just came from North Dakota, middle of United States.
No, this is that's so important for us to think about too. Just and then we're going to hear from Doua. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, Doua. But just thinking about, I'm thinking about my own mentors. I'm thinking about Arnitha Ball and Andrea Lunsford and Guadalupe Valdez and John Rickford, and folks who kind of looked out for me when I was a doc student, and hearing you, Jazmen. I remember that maybe 21-year-old Jazmen, was it? Or 20-year-old Jazmen, whatever it was. 20.
Baby Jazmen.
Coming over, doing the reading at our house and all that in East Lansing. But just thinking about
scared, nervous.
the intergenerationality, right, of this work, obviously of our communities. I think it might be something that we return to in a bit, but I'm hearing it, loud and clear here. And I think it's so important. And then also thinking about spaces and communities and where we see each other, or how, I remember reading your application, Doua, and you had, there had been some poetry in there. And you were talking about your community, you were talking about your commitments. And even though we didn't know each other before that, there was something that spoke, through what you were committed to and how you were forwarding your commitment. So maybe you could share a little bit about your journey, I know you were also in a master's program when you were applying. I believe you hadn't you hadn't finished. You were in a master's program when you were applying. So maybe you could share a little bit about your journey to doctoral work.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing from both Jazmen and Alayna first, because I feel like my story kind of blends a bit of both of them. Just like Jazmen, like I was a high school English language arts teacher, and it was my work with my kiddos who are predominantly Black and brown queer students that they were like, like we wish that you were our, gender sexuality alliance teacher and advisor. And I was like, oh, like, why is that? I was, I'm already an English teacher. Like, I'm pretty sure that's enough. And they're like, no, it's just because like, it's so hard to talk about, queer identities and, Blackness and brownness and the blending of so many intersectionality. And I feel like you can fully understand that a lot more than our current advisor. And so it was actually them who inspired me to go back into getting my master's degree.
Right.
And I thought to myself, like, I'm just gonna get my master's. I'm not gonna get, a doctoral because I don't got the money for it, like funding's a lot of issues. But the longer that I stayed in my master program, I experienced, what a lot of Jazmen and Alayna described, which was searching for that mentorship. I appreciated my advisor, my master's program advisor. He's an amazing dope scholar who has trailblazed so many educational spaces, but he wasn't the advisor that I was looking for. So then I remember one of my sorority sister, Brittany, she attended the University of Washington. And so Brittany was like, if you're looking for a multicultural education program, like UW has a really good one. So why don't you think about that? So I actually applied for UW as a backup because I was like, I don't know where
Wait. We're going to have to erase that from the podcast. No, anyway, go ahead.
It's on the record.
Yeah, it's on the record now. So, but the reason why I applied as a backup was because I wanted to stay near my home community, which is predominantly in the Midwest. And so, the other universities that I applied to were Midwest based. Mm-hmm. And then one day I get a phone call from Django. And, prior to this, I haven't met Django. I have no relationships to Django. I didn't know anybody from the University of Washington besides Brittany. So then when I got this phone call, I was like, somebody's calling me and it's from Washington. And so I ended up picking up and Django's like, hi, Doua, my name is Django. I read your application, and I just want to call you and let you know that I would love for you to attend here. And, I think that was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, like he actually cares about my work. And not just only care, but like the way that Django, you talked about it made it seem as if like, I could definitely change the world with my work, and like, for a young master's student who's the first in their family to go to, grad school, like that's a lot to take in, and that's very inspiring and powerful. And so, and Django goes all and like says all this and then goes, oh, by the way, I also secure funding for you, so it's just like, what? And I got funding, like, oh, okay, so I always tell people like I came to Washington because of Django, like, and he reached out personally. And I didn't get that when I was in my master program. My advisor was amazing, but he also questioned if I was taking grad school seriously. And so, like when you want someone in your corner, you want someone in your village. Like you don't want someone to keep questioning you or make you feel as if the work that you're doing is small or little. And so I was just like, like I just needed another advisor that would fit more with me. And I think I found that with Django. And so, since coming here, it was away from my family, it was away from my community, and it was nerve-wracking. But I think that it was the best decision that I made. So I think the growth and community that I found here was something that I probably could not have found if I had stayed in the Midwest, if I had stayed somewhere where it's comfortable, where I didn't have someone who was willing and the patience to mentor me, So I think that was like really my journey towards coming here, was in search of that mentorship, which I found, fortunately.
Thank you, Doua. Yeah, no, this is really, I'm thinking about folks who might be listening to this conversation and thinking about people who are thinking about maybe graduate school, particularly doctoral studies, or who are in doctoral programs, or who are mentors, or who are faculty members, and just thinking about, we talk about, the Bank Center for Educational Justice, or we talk about and try to enact culturally sustaining education, but to think about the ways that it can and needs to sort of run through the way we teach and learn, across across our lives and communities, but including right in these institutions. So I appreciate these answers. I thought we'd talk just a little bit, thinking about this article and some of the work within the center. So you have all been research assistants over the years in the center, and then on this Spencer Foundation grant that we got with H. Samuel Leem and Casey Wong, and then all of us to work in partnership with some amazing folks in South Africa and Spain and California, and then here on Coast Salish lands. And so, I'm thinking about who you all are, who I am, who Ray is, who our communities are. And I'm thinking about the ways that we've been really intentional in trying to think about centering and sustaining Black and Indigenous communities in particular, and through our work, across these early years. And that's something that we were intentional early on. I'm remembering, Jazmen, some of our early work that first year, those first couple years we had, the gathering for Native teacher education.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Teaching for Black Lives gathering. We were really trying to think about and contribute to and learn, the ways we could contribute to that work. So I'm thinking particularly about some projects, right? This project I was just talking about, the Spencer Foundation supported project, our piece of which is to have the honor of learning in community with Chelsea Craig and Anthony Craig, in the Tulalip Culturally Sustaining Education Project over the last few years, just trying to learn with them about the ways that, since time immemorial, but including their beautiful work, they have centered and sustained, Tulalip lifeways, Coast Salish lifeways, Yakima lifeways, through their work in elementary schools, but also in their families and in a lot of community settings. And I'm thinking about the Black Mentoring Collaborative that Ray Paris and myself and Jazmen and a Black undergraduate student, Navon, have been working on this last year. I'm thinking about the Summer Scholars Program. We mentioned Sandy Grande, but these courses that we've been offering, in these summers. And so I'm thinking about these projects. And so one thing I would like to just maybe start by thinking about with you three is what in this work with, with Chelsea Craig, who is the vice principal at Cosita Tulalip Elementary, and Anthony Craig, who directs the Leadership for Learning program. They are actually meeting today, I think, over at the Intellectual House, and they're working with Paige Pettibon, doing their own art workshop, right? With Paige Pettibon, who was our distinguished summer artist as well this week. So thinking about a lot of the ways this work kind of, intersects and moves together. But maybe you all could share a little bit about anything that just comes to mind. It doesn't have to be, long, but anything that comes to mind about what you've learned from working with Anthony and Chelsea Craig, Grandma Patty Gobin, and the community, or just on that project. What kind of things just come to mind, right off? Maybe, do you want to start on that, Doua and Alayna, if anything's coming to mind right off? Because I know we were starting that project in I guess it's January, February 2020, right before COVID hit, right? I remember we went up to Tulalip, to the Tulalip Reservation, and we were meeting with Anthony and Chelsea in the old Tulalip school there and just starting to learn. But anything that comes to mind, just as things that you're learning from being on that project, or in any way that you'd like to share? Doua, you want to start?
Sure. The first thing that came to mind is the intergenerational collectiveness towards healing. And I think and the reason why I phrase it that way is because right now, I think within my own personal home community, like I'm struggling with the fact that a lot of our elders don't listen to young people. And so when I came on board this project, to see that be modeled before me authentically, you know, was very beautiful. Because, you know, I've been taught to always sit at the feet of our elders and learn and listen from them. But so often we don't sit at the feet of our young people. And I think listening and talking to Anthony, Chelsea, and Grandma Patty and all, you know, and the kids, and just like, oh wow, like they're all learning from each other, and it's possible, you know, like that possibility does exist. It is there. And just because, you know, we haven't always, because I haven't always seen it within my community doesn't mean that it's not happening. And I think that gives me so much hope and possibilities, you know, of what I can envision in the future. Because it's a lot nervous, you know, to imagine something that hasn't existed before, but when you see it that it does, you're like, oh, like that gives you that hope. And so I think that was the thing that I learned the most, and I think that was what made me really want to, you know, consider how can I, you know, moving forward continue to do this intergenerational work, you know, and not just think about it in terms of like, oh, here's adults and then here's young people, like it's a binary, because it's not. Especially when thinking,
yeah, no, I love what you're saying about also seeing it in practice, because one of the reasons I remember when, you know, as H. Samuel Leem and I were kind of, you know, working, and Casey were working on this grant, and so Aleem had been working with, you know, communities in Cape Town and El Raval, you know, in South Africa and Spain, and Casey had been working with communities in East Palo Alto and California for some years. And I had known, you know, Ray and I had met Anthony and Chelsea maybe a year and a half before, and just started hearing about their work, learning about their work, seeing them present about their work, you know, through other connections. And it was like, and it was just as you're saying, it was like, these are folks that have been doing this work, this culturally sustaining work, this, you know, we could name it a lot of different ways, right? This work of resurgence and reclamation. And it would be amazing if they felt good about it for us to learn together over some time, and to kind of lean in. So anything that comes to mind for you, Alayna?
I think mine are a lot of similar. Like I felt like I could see myself and my community in the work that they were doing, because there was so thinking of like how language, it's continuously evolving, it's forever changing, and they're adapting, and they have immersion schools, and those are things that like my family was involved in back home. And so I continued to see myself in the work that they were doing, whether it was like, yeah, the struggles, the hardships, the ways that we all need to heal together, how we carry teachings into all the spaces that we are in. I think I really appreciated too, like the vulnerability that they were sharing with us in how their communities work, and how I just feel like there's so many paths that, and this is something I've talked about before, or I'm just now trying to talk about, or trying to figure out the words for within my own context. But I think they've been modeling this like not romanticizing the ways that things could or should have been but they're just like basically putting one foot in front of the other, or building the sidewalk as they're walking, in language, in the ways that they work within their community, how they approach their healing.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking as you're saying that, I'm thinking about Jazmen. Well, lots of things, that trip we took up, and got to be there for Tulalip Day earlier in the fall. But I'm thinking of you know, kind of what's possible now in school spaces, and kind of seeing, one thing that I've been really learning is seeing what it means to really commit to doing the work within schools, even as we know that schools have been and continue to be harmful for many of our communities, public, you know, nation state public education. And so that's really been a learning place for me. Jazmen, you want to just say a word or two? I know we could talk about this project, and we will for years to come, but do you want to just say a word or two about this, the Black Mentoring Collaborative that we started this year, just, you know, got going, you know, during these COVID times, but basically getting, you know, Black undergrads and faculty connected and funded to spend time together, But anything that comes to mind just in this initial work that you could share?
Yeah, so first I just want to acknowledge the Black Opportunity Fund at the University of Washington that's
Absolutely.
helped to make this possible, helped to make a number of really necessary, important projects just help to bring them into fruition. And I know that that was something that you and Ray Paris applied for, I think along with Navon, or just insight from the work of building with undergraduate students and student activists and organizers.
Who were really
in
the reason that
2020.
fund exists, exactly, because they were pushing the
Exactly.
university to really do right by Black people, right?
Yes,
Students,
absolutely.
communities, faculty. That's right.
Yes. And so we benefit from their organizing work, from
Thank you
their
for that.
relentlessness in making that possible. And just thinking of how the beliefs, from what I've learned and understood from being involved with the project, is working to create an opportunity to make these intergenerational relationships take place and to happen between and across uh, the relationships between Black undergraduate students and Black faculty members. And I say that idea about across is we didn't want it to just seem like the mentorship is one way.
That's right.
It's like, here are the faculty members, they have all the knowledge and the wisdom that they're going to deposit into the youth, but it was really making space for there to be like some collective learning and growing. And I think that all of the faculty members who are on board, who volunteered this year, agreed to be a part of the
That's right.
project, we're also on board with that, not seeing this as like going back to what Doua mentioned earlier, knowing that there's something that still can be learned from those who are younger. So I wouldn't necessarily call all the faculty members involved as elders, but they are adults. And so just recognizing that there's still much to be learned.
We ourselves are intergenerational. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. We've got earlier folks in the game and folks that have been at it a little bit longer. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so what happened was we worked with Navon, who was like our undergraduate, I think about his exact title, but just like rep within our planning team, research assistant, or just rep within. And he, because of his relationships with a number of Black student orgs on campus, was able to reach out and kind of do some recruitment work, let them know about the goals and the intentions of the Black Mentoring Collaborative to just create this intergenerational space of learning, sharing, being in community with each other, and also acknowledging that it came with a stipend. And so what we were seeking to do,
coming back to the funding thing,
coming back to the funds, it's like we know that what's happened in our communities for years, for decades, is people coming and being together and being able to support one another in different ways. But we also know that, especially during these times, it's also nice. It's like, we're going to be able to provide a meal, or we're going to give you a stipend so that you can use this money on a project that makes sense for you. Right. And so anyways, we did some recruiting on both ends for faculty and undergraduate students. We tried to pair folks based on their interests, their passions, the things they care deeply about, whether that was specifically academic based or beyond. And we encourage folks to spend their time in these mentor pairings in ways that made sense for them. The biggest like kind of requirements was just that they were intentional about meeting. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the quarter. And we had an opening gathering, and we were planning for a closing gathering, and things got a little difficult. So we facilitated that differently as we kind of closed things up for the quarter. But as I mentioned to Alice, and is noted in the article, we were really just trying to move with a lot of care and compassion, recognizing that people are carrying a lot. There's many responsibilities. We had some undergraduate student participants who were graduating, who were, preparing for other responsibilities during the summer. We had faculty members who were carrying a number of different responsibilities too, but we're just grateful for the folks who were willing to commit to being a part of like this first iteration of it. And it's going to continue to just shape how we want to continue to move forward. And we started with a pretty small group to try to keep things intimate, to try to really think deeply about what we wanted to learn in this first go at having the mentoring collaborative. And I'll just say that like it was always a gift for me to be in those spaces and just like hearing from the students and the faculty members what they were sharing, the things that they care deeply about. And so I'm hoping we can just continue to use this as a model moving forward to just build on this and create more opportunities for these type of mentor pairings.
Beautiful. So I'm looking at our time, and there's so many things that I still want to talk about, but I'll just mention, you all mentioned in the article I was looking at kind of what you had said about the Sandy Grande and Leslie Williams class, the Alexis Pauline Gums class, the Eve Tuck class, this Paige Pettibon workshop that we just had, the Summer Scholars and Artists series, and how much it's meant to your own work. And so I just want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge those beautiful learning opportunities. I want to acknowledge the tradition that James Banks started of inviting folks here to work in the summer, and just give thanks for that. A little bit earlier, when we were meeting as the sort of Django and Fam doctoral student group, a little bit earlier in the year, I had asked you all to think about sort of distilling what it is you do in your work down to just a sentence or two. And I'm not going to ask you to do that necessarily on the fly right now, but I am going to ask you to distill your work into a sentence or two, just so that you can tell people that are listening what it is that you are thinking about, what it is that you're really trying to join and contribute to, but just in a really, in a brief way. Like, I could do that for you, because I know each of your work really, and learn with each of your work really well, pretty deeply. But just share what it is that you are up to invite folks to think more, read more, and engage more in the future. So Jazmen Moore, as our doctoral candidate who's just got a year left in the program here. We don't want to see you graduate, but we do want to see you graduate at the same time, because we know you have so much to give in so many ways. So let us know.
Yes, so the things that I care deeply about, my research or the work that's grounding me, is thinking deeply about chosen learning spaces, thinking about the relationships between consent and refusal in the context of learning, and in particular, thinking about Black girls' refusals, and how by learning from Black girls' refusals, Black girls' literacies, and navigational practice, and refusals as a navigational practice, how can we really prioritize creating and sustaining more justice-based learning experiences for Black girls with this context in mind. And I think that moving forward, I want to continue to honor what I'm able to learn through arts-based practices and methods as well. Thinking about what Ruth Nicole Brown talks about, the creative potential of Black girlhood in chosen spaces, using arts-based ways of knowing as well. And thinking about chosen spaces, I want to continue building with that, thinking about that more broadly, definitely what it means for Black girls, Black girlhood, and allowing for an expansive Black girlhood, but also thinking about chosen learning spaces and what those offer us across a number of non-compulsory learning settings and spaces as well.
That's right. Perfect. Wonderful. And we will congratulate you here live on the podcast for the National Academy of Education Spencer Foundation Dissertation Fellowship to support that.
Thank you, Sam.
Alayna, do you want to share just a little bit about kind of, what you're thinking about, or what you're trying to contribute to, or however you want to approach that?
First of all, I'd like to know what your elevator speech for my work is, because I was that. Because it's hard to think about. I feel like my work has been, revitalizing, rebuilding, uplifting the lifeways of the Ocheti Chacoin people, where I come from, Lakota, Wapka, and Arikara, and thinking of how to use birth as an anchor, or rebirth as an anchor in a lot of the work. So there's work around actual birth. I've been doing, I had 2 home births during the pandemic, which I don't know, crazy. And they've taught me so much about the indigenous birthing practices that we've had that have been stolen from us, and how we've been that's the beginning of everything, And so when we're not given those teachings, whether or not a person chooses to birth at home or in the hospital, there's so many teachings around transferring of character, how to celebrate the new life in a way where we welcome these spirits, and we call the spirits Earthside to be here so that they could thrive. And, there's all these teachings that come from the very beginning. And so I think the work that I'm focusing on is how do we enact these teachings in my community together in a way that we're relearning and understanding each other's roles at the same time. Because I think like one of the teachings that we just started to do is we started to do like community building by putting up teepees together, which we just started that. And it's been really cool to see the roles that people step in. And it's like this real-time activity where we get to see like how folks communicate with each other, roles we take up, space we take up or don't take up. And so I think, and there's things that people don't know. And so the work that I do is like helping to revitalize and rebuild together in real time. Yeah, I don't know.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, and Doua, now that we've had two, what would you add just in terms of what you're working to join and contribute to? Yeah,
I guess for me, I guess my interest is really looking at the ways that queer and trans Hmong youth, or as we call them, like Doua, the way that they are collectively like sustaining and reworking Hmong culture. And by reworking, I also want to draw attention to the way that they're also queering Hmong culture, because Hmong culture is still right now, we're still struggling with how gendered it is, but they're definitely queering it. And while doing so, they're also disrupting like white cis heteropatriarchal culture along with it. So it's very interesting because, we don't have a, quote unquote country per se, so our history moves with us, our culture, our language moves with us. And so the way that they're moving and disrupting this, it's so interesting to see the way things are changing, like what Alayna said, like language is always constantly changing. And I'm seeing that in real time, and it's wild, but it's amazing. And so it's very nerve-wracking also because like you thought of culture as like, this is what I grew up with, so it's like you don't mean to gatekeep, but you're also like, this is what I grew up with, and they're changing it, So it's also, recognizing that like, hey, there are some things that I need to change about myself too. And I think this journey has really took me there. Yeah.
thank you so much. Yeah, no, I hope that people that are listening and hearing a bit about Jazmen, Alayna, and Doua's work, to keep looking for it and keep engaging these folks in the various places they are, scholarly, in the world, in the communities, online, because the work is so vital. I think we can hear a lot of conversations between the three of your projects, and also they're very much fiercely dedicated to your own communities, to yourselves, to your futures, and I really appreciate that that fierce dedication and that anchoring that none of you have allowed academia or any of these things to unmoor. And so I really appreciate that. So we're headed toward the end of our moment, our conversation today. And I'm thinking also about the fact that you all are sharing this work you're doing, and we've been doing it in just these really heavy and unrelenting times, right? It's been, as you had mentioned, Alayna, and I think Jazmen earlier but it's been 2 years of pandemic, and that's ongoing. Emboldened white supremacy, climate catastrophe, but also these ongoing movements for land back, for Black lives, for queer people, and on. I could keep naming things, right? And just to think about the ways that your work and hopefully our collective work joins and adds to that. And so if there's anything that you all would like to any parting words you'd like to offer, just in terms of the work now, what it means to do this work right now, and how you're feeling about it, you're welcome to offer those words, and or just to say peace, whatever you'd like to close out here.
Yeah, something that's really coming to mind for me, based on just our conversation today and the connections between it, as well as something that one of the co-researchers, participants in my dissertation project, who has been such a gift, is also one of my students that I taught in high school and is now, a young adult. But she brought this point up for me, and I continue to see it everywhere, but it's like the importance and necessity of relationships. And I'm saying this now, and it may be like, duh, but I think that as we talk about how we all know each other, how we came to be in this place, it had to do with the relationships that we've cultivated. When we think about the work that we are grateful to be able to do and the learning we're engaging in with Chelsea and Anthony, it's about relationships that have been fostered and cultivated over time. As we think about what has sustained us, or I'll speak for myself, me being in grad school and continuing to be in grad school, despite how intensely like these times have, affected us nationally, globally. And I know personally, just in the context of my own family, what kept me from taking time off in different ways and kept me in grad school and continuing to pursue this goals were the relationships with my cousin, with my close friends, with my family, but also the support from you all as chosen kin and as family to continue pursuing things that feel important and to not feel that I am making the wrong choice or the wrong decision, to continue to pursue things that honor my commitments to the people I hold myself accountable to Black girls, to Black communities, to also other communities of color and beyond that. So I'm just thinking about those relationships as being absolutely vital. And I think sometimes the academy tries to position it as this is a space where those things shouldn't be important, where friendships are not at the forefront, where chosen kin is not something that, becomes a factor in deciding where you go to school or how you pursue your work. But I think that that is really at the core of a lot of what I have learned from being in community with y'all, and what is, kept me rooted and anchored, especially across these continuing trying times. So also just I love y'all and I appreciate y'all, and I just wanted to shout that piece out.
Yeah, anybody else want to offer anything? Thank you for that, Jazmen.
Yeah, I guess I would like to add in that I've started seeing a lot of the learnings that I've been fortunate to have taken from y'all as like inheritance or gifts, and I think it's the way that like the Hmong people, like we see stories as inheritance and gifts, and so it's like a lot of the learnings that I'm learning from y'all are gifts that y'all have given me, and I appreciate that so much, and it's like I can't believe that we can collectively build a legacy together. We contribute to this gift together, and continue to pass it down. So I'll just say thank you so much for being a part of that legacy.
Thank you, Doua.
Yes. And I think my biggest, for sure, relationships, for sure, love, all of the support and commitment to each other and our work and being just relatives in this work. But I also think like making time and space for the process, because for me, I think I didn't see how interconnected everything was, like the climate change, climate crisis, injustices and just like how they continue to compact, and so these things that we're learning and the ways that we're able to heal is like a part of our processing. So when we're reading or connecting with this certain source or whatever, like that you're gonna go through so much. I feel like I went through, oh man, I'm leaving, I'm gonna quit. Django knows I went through waves in my process, and I feel like that's been a part of how we work through this work is we have to know that there's a process. I don't know how else to describe it. But yeah, so to be patient with that and be patient with yourself, and just continue to learn, not necessarily like push forward, because I don't think that's like it can be counterproductive if you're just whatever. But I think like internally thinking of how the readings are affecting you, the outside world is connected to like things that folks have said before, ways that you have been raised, or whatever. All these things are like a part of your own process, and so figure out who can support that process, what types of scholars are writing about, things that connect with you. And I don't know if that makes sense, but for instance, like the first summer that I came here, I was like so nervous because I was like, I'm barely learning some of this terminology. And also I'm not sure if I want to be here. I'm so nervous, like there were just so many things I was going through. And then I started to learn about all these different interconnected, these settler entanglements and all of these things that like were imposed upon us. And that there's a reason that so many of our communities are like pit against each other for either if it's for land or labor and all of these different things that folks have gone through. And I feel like that was like a part of my unlearning and just ignorance too. And so I think my process has been like forgiving myself for what I didn't know, forgiving my family, my community, and also knowing that there's a lot of work to do, but I don't ever have to do it alone.
Thank you so much for that, Alayna. And to you three, really hoping that folks who listen to this conversation can gain something for your all own work in your communities and in communities that you're in solidarity with. That's why we're thinking of relationship in these ways, and that's why we're thinking of centering and sustaining in these ways. And it's needed, and we thank you, and we hope that you keep taking good care. Peace, everyone.